Imagine standing in the shadow of the Roman Colosseum, a structure so monumental it feels like it's always been a part of our world. Now picture yourself in a deep, dark cave, your hand tracing the outline of a bison painted on a wall by firelight tens of thousands of years ago. What connects these two moments? What is the thread that runs from that simple, powerful art to the grandeur of empires? The answer is a story, the longest story ever told. It's the story of us. For over 99% of human history, there were no written records, no grand monuments, no empires. Our ancient ancestors lived through ages of ice, invented the tools that shaped our world, and laid the groundwork for everything that was to come. This vast expanse of time, from the first stone tool to the fall of the last classical empire, is what we call the ancient world. On this channel, we explore the incredible narratives of our past, and today, we're embarking on our most fundamental journey yet. We're going to travel through the entire timeline of human existence in the ancient world, from the dawn of humanity in the Paleolithic, through the revolutionary shift of the Neolithic, into the ages of bronze and iron, all the way to the empires that defined antiquity. We'll see how each of these phases built upon the last, setting the stage for the modern world. This is the ultimate ancient odyssey, and you're going to want to see it through to the end. So, make sure you're subscribed to Ancient Odyssey and have that notification bell clicked, because we're just getting started. So, where does our story begin? Not with pyramids or pharaohs, but in a world locked in ice. Our first chapter, the Paleolithic or Old Stone Age, is the longest by a staggering margin. We're talking about a period that stretches back over 3 million years, all the way up to about 12,000 years ago. To put that immense scale into perspective, if the entire timeline of human existence were a 24-hour day, recorded history, everything from the first pharaoh to you watching this video would fit into the last few seconds. This was the foundation of everything, the stage upon which humanity first learned to act. And our first leading role on that stage was played by a simple, yet revolutionary technology, the stone tool. It started with crude, sharpened pebbles, like the Oldowan choppers used by early hominins, little more than smashed rocks with a cutting edge. But over millennia, the technology refined dramatically. Imagine a skilled Homo heidelbergensis or an early Neanderthal carefully striking a core of flint again and again, methodically knocking off flakes to create a perfect, symmetrical Acheulean hand axe. This wasn't just a tool, it was the first multi-purpose Swiss Army knife, used for butchering game, scraping hides, and digging for roots. This was the bedrock of survival, the spark of ingenuity that set us on our path. But survival in this world was a brutal, daily struggle. Our ancestors were not the apex predators yet. They were often the prey. Their life was one of constant movement, a nomadic existence following the great herds of mammoths, bison, and reindeer. They lived in small, kin-based bands, their knowledge of the land and its seasons etched into their very survival. And then, they tamed the one element that separates us from the rest of the natural world: fire. The control of fire, likely beginning with Homo erectus over 1 million years ago, was a quantum leap. It provided warmth against the biting cold, protection from predators that stalked the night, and crucially, it allowed for cooking. Cooking made food safer and easier to digest, potentially unlocking more energy that would, in turn, fuel the evolution of our larger brains. And with those larger brains came something even more profound: the birth of the human mind as we understand it. This wasn't just about survival, it was about the need to express, to question, to believe. In the deep, silent darkness of caves like Lascaux in France or Altamira in Spain, they painted. By the flickering light of torches, they rendered bison, horses, and stags with a breathtaking vitality that still resonates tens of thousands of years later. We don't know the exact meaning. Was it ritual, a form of sympathetic hunting magic, or simply the first stirrings of art for art's sake? What we do know is that it represents a cognitive revolution. They carved small, voluptuous figurines like the Venus of Willendorf, perhaps symbols of fertility and the continuity of life. And they began to bury their dead with purpose, placing tools and ochre in the graves, suggesting the first glimmers of belief in an afterlife, a world beyond the visible. This was the true dawn of humanity, not just the making of tools, but the birth of culture, spirit, and the relentless curiosity that would eventually push us out of the caves and into the wide world. That spark of human creativity, born in the flickering firelight of the caves, was about to set the world ablaze. The long, slow spring of the Paleolithic gave way to a period of dramatic and rapid change that would fundamentally alter the human story forever. This was the Neolithic Revolution, and it's not an exaggeration to call it the most important shift in human history since the mastery of fire. Forget slow evolution. This was a big bang. Around 12,000 years ago, in a few specific hubs around the world, most notably the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, our ancestors made a conscious, monumental decision to stop following their food and to start growing it. This shift was built on a new, revolutionary relationship with the world around them. It began with domestication. Through a process of selective breeding that was likely born of observation and necessity, wild grasses like emmer and einkorn wheat were transformed into reliable crops. The fierce aurochs, ancestors of modern cattle, were gradually tamed, along with goats, sheep, and pigs. This was a new contract with nature. We protect and nurture you, and you provide us with a steady, predictable supply of food, wool, and muscle. This new toolkit of plants and animals was our first step towards bending the environment to our will. With it came new technologies tailored to this new way of life. The simple, portable toolkit of the hunter was joined by heavy, groundstone tools, polished axes for clearing land and sickles for harvesting grain. And with the need to store these new grain harvests came one of humanity's most iconic and durable inventions, pottery. For the first time, we had containers to store, cook, and transport our surplus. And that surplus was the key that unlocked the next chapter of humanity. For the first time, it was possible and necessary to stay in one place. Why follow the herds when your larder is growing right outside your door? This led to the world's first permanent, year-round settlements. We're no longer talking about temporary campsites, but about true villages, like the incredible sight of Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey, with its honeycomb of mud brick houses entered through roofs. Or the formidable walls of Jericho, which speak not just of community, but of something new, the need to defend accumulated wealth and resources. This was a complete rewiring of the human psyche. People developed a profound, generational connection to a single piece of land. Their ancestors were buried beneath the floors of their homes, literally tying them to the place. This new, settled existence created a domino effect that reshaped human society forever. With a reliable food supply, populations exploded. But more importantly, for the first time, not everyone had to be a farmer. This surplus of food allowed for specialization of labor. One person could become an exceptionally skilled potter, another a full-time weaver, another a toolmaker, trading their goods for the food grown by others. And with this specialization came social stratification. The most successful farmers, the skilled artisans, or those who claimed a special connection to the divine began to accumulate more wealth and influence than their neighbors. We see evidence of this in graves. Some individuals are buried with fine pottery, tools, and ornaments, while others are not. The seeds of class structure, of leaders and followers, were sown right here in these Neolithic villages. This was the end of a shared, nomadic struggle and the beginning of the complex, unequal, and technologically dynamic world we inhabit today. The stage was now set for the next great leap, a leap that would literally be forged in fire. The seeds planted during the Neolithic were about to bear fruit in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. The stable, surplus-producing societies of the late Stone Age created a new problem: a need for more durable, efficient tools and, crucially, more valuable and definitive symbols of power and status. The answer was found not in stone, but in the very earth itself. We now enter the Age of Metal, a period of dazzling innovation that begins with a tentative copper-colored glow and erupts into the brilliant, alloyed strength of bronze. This transition didn't happen overnight. It began with a fascinating, hybrid era known as the Chalcolithic, or Copper Age. Here, for the first time, humans began to heat and hammer naturally occurring copper into beads, pins, and small tools. But this was still a soft metal, largely decorative and impractical for heavy work. The true revolution, the one that defines this entire chapter, was the discovery of alloying. Somewhere, in a furnace hot enough to liquefy stone, an anonymous genius, or perhaps a happy accident, found that by mixing copper with a small amount of tin, they created a new metal, bronze. This was a material that was harder than copper, would hold a sharper edge, and could be cast into intricate shapes. This was alchemy. The ability to smelt and cast bronze required specialized knowledge, creating a new class of highly skilled, revered artisans, the first metallurgists, who guarded their fiery secrets closely. This new, superior material acted as a catalyst, supercharging the trajectory of human society. With bronze axes, forests could be cleared for farmland on an unprecedented scale. With bronze-tipped plows, farmers could till tougher, more fertile soil. But the most profound impact was inevitably martial. Bronze weapons, swords, spearheads, and armor were game-changers. They created a new class of professional warriors and made warfare more organized, more deadly, and more decisive. This concentration of military power, combined with the agricultural surplus, allowed for the emergence of something the world had never seen: true cities and centralized states. We are no longer in villages like Catalhoyuk. We are in the walled, labyrinthine city of Uruk in Mesopotamia, with its towering ziggurats. We are in the old kingdom of Egypt, where the pharaoh, a living god, commands the manpower to raise the pyramids as his eternal tomb. This is the birth of civilization, as we often picture it. And with these states came humanity's most powerful tool, writing. The complexity of managing vast grain stores, organizing labor, recording laws, and celebrating the deeds of kings became too much for memory alone. In Mesopotamia, they pressed a stylus into wet clay to create cuneiform. In Egypt, they painted hieroglyphs on papyrus and tomb walls. Writing allowed for the codification of law, like the Code of Hammurabi, and the recording of history, moving us from prehistory into history itself. This created a network of international trade and diplomacy, as empires like the Hittites, Mycenaeans, and Egyptians connected in a complex, globalized system for the first time, all chasing the essential tin and copper needed to sustain their bronze-based power. But this first brilliant age of empires was built on a fragile foundation. Around 1200 BCE, the entire intricate system of the eastern Mediterranean and Near East spectacularly collapsed. The grand palaces of the Mycenaeans and the Hittite capital of Hattusa were burned and abandoned. Egypt barely survived, battered and diminished. The causes are still debated: a perfect storm of climate change, drought, internal rebellion, and mass migrations by the mysterious sea peoples. But the result was clear. A dark age fell, the international trade routes for tin shattered, and the Bronze Age closed. Yet from its ashes a new, even harder metal was waiting in the wings, a common material that would democratize power and forge the classical world. From the smoldering ruins of the Bronze Age collapse, a new, harder world was forged. The old palace economies were broken, and the secretive, tin-dependent networks that powered them were shattered. But necessity, as always, was the mother of invention. The metal that would define the next millennium was not a rare alloy, but one of the most common elements on Earth: iron. This was not a gentle transition, it was a paradigm shift. Smelting iron required even higher temperatures and more sophisticated furnace technology than bronze, but the payoff was immense. Iron ore was everywhere, from Anatolia to boglands in the north. This wasn't a metal controlled by a distant king or a narrow trade route. It was a democratizing force. Any village with a skilled smith and a hot enough fire could produce tools and weapons that were superior to bronze. Harder, sharper, and with the ability to be mass-produced. The age of elite, bronze-clad warriors was over. The age of massive, iron-equipped armies was born. This new, widely available strength fueled the rise of empires that were larger, more ruthless, and more administratively sophisticated than anything the Bronze Age had seen. The first to master it on a grand scale were the Assyrians, who combined the sheer terror of iron-weaponed warfare with siege engines and a professional army to create the first true military machine. They were followed by the breathtaking administrative marvel of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, a sprawling domain connected by royal roads and unified by a single language, stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea. Iron was the backbone of their power, the material that shod their horses, tipped their spears, and built the infrastructure that held their vast territories together. But the story of the Iron Age reaches its most iconic peak not in the East, but around the Mediterranean. Here, the availability of iron tools allowed for more intensive farming, supporting larger populations and new forms of government. In the rocky soil of Greece, it gave rise to the city-state or polis. The iron that forged the hoplite spear and shield also forged a new idea: citizenship. In places like Athens, this eventually led to the radical experiment of democracy, where the power to govern was, in theory, placed in the hands of the freeborn citizens. Their philosophical and artistic achievements, built upon this iron foundation, would become the bedrock of Western thought. And then came Rome. The Romans were not the first, but they were perhaps the most brilliant engineers and organizers of the Iron Age. The gladius, the short, ruthless iron sword of the legionary, was an instrument of conquest unlike any the world had seen. But it was the iron in their tools that was just as important. It was the iron pickaxe that quarried the stone for their roads, the iron chisel that shaped the aqueducts that fed their cities, and the iron clamps that held their colossal structures like the Colosseum together. Rome was an empire of iron, and with that iron, they built a unified world, stretching from the misty highlands of Scotland to the deserts of Arabia. They codified laws, created a common currency, and spread a culture that would shape Europe for millennia to come. This long arc of human progress, from the first chipped stone to the zenith of Roman engineering, had to reach its conclusion. The ancient world, as a distinct era, did not fade away, it fell. A combination of factors, internal political decay, economic crisis, and mounting pressure from migrating tribes on the frontiers, finally caused the Western Roman Empire to fracture and collapse in the 5th century CE. The legions withdrew, the roads fell silent, and the unified Mediterranean world splintered. This event, traditionally marked by the deposition of the last Roman emperor in 476 CE, is the definitive closing of the Iron Age and the end of the ancient world itself. The long, foundational journey from stone to empire was complete, setting the stage for the vastly different landscapes of the medieval era. And so, our odyssey reaches its end. We have traveled across millions of years, from the first spark of ingenuity in a humble stone tool to the awe-inspiring scale of a world connected by Roman roads and law. It's a journey that can feel impossibly vast, yet it's a story defined by a series of profound, intimate revolutions. The controlled use of fire that gathered us around a shared hearth. The deliberate planting of a seed that rooted us to the land. The alchemical genius of alloying metal that built our first cities. And the widespread mastery of iron that forged the classical world. This entire epic, from the Paleolithic to the fall of Rome, is not just a collection of dates and artifacts. It is our collective inheritance. Every time we write something down, we are using a technology first invented in the bureaucracies of Sumer. Every time we debate a law or a leader, we are echoing the forums of Athens and Rome. The very concept of living in a settled community, of specializing in a trade, of creating art, it was all forged in these ancient crucibles. This long arc of history shows us that humanity is defined by adaptation, by our relentless drive to understand our environment and reshape it, for better or for worse. We are the species that looked at a river and saw not just water, but irrigation, that looked at a rock and saw not just a stone, but a future sword or a plowshare. The fall of the Western Roman Empire may have closed the book on the ancient world, but it did not end our story. It simply passed the pen. The foundations laid over these countless generations, in agriculture, technology, law, art, and governance, would become the bedrock upon which the medieval, the Renaissance, and our modern world were built. The Odyssey never truly stopped. It simply changed course. If this journey through the deepest layers of our past has sparked your curiosity, just imagine what we'll uncover next. We have only just begun to scratch the surface of the incredible stories, the lost empires, and the fascinating figures that make up our ancient heritage. Your support is what allows us to continue this exploration. So, if you haven't already, please help us on this ongoing journey by subscribing to Ancient Odyssey. Hit that bell so you won't miss our next adventure into the past. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep exploring.